Hello, my name is Amy Arner. I am a wife and a mom of 2 boys and the creator of the Sovereign Mother YouTube channel. And today I want to share with you my positive, natural birth story. So I found out that I was pregnant with our first child in October of 2019. And like many new moms, I was very excited and also just very nervous for this new chapter. I've always wanted to be a mom, but there's always a little bit of nerve when it finally happens, when you finally get pregnant and you realize that your whole life is going to change. And we ended up finding out the gender, so we knew that we were going to be having a baby boy. So we were so excited. As we all know, 2020 ended up taking quite a turn as we headed into the new year. And I remember just that whole pregnancy feeling so excited with such anxiety, just having so much fear over going into the hospital. As far as my pregnancy goes, it was a healthy pregnancy. I really had no issues. I worked out every day. I felt really good, minus the first trimester. I had, nausea, and I just remember feeling like so lethargic and just queasy. Once I got into my second trimester and beyond, I just remember feeling just so good. I don't look back or feel like I had any real complaints about being pregnant. However, although I was really excited and pregnancy was what I would call a good pregnancy, I had a lot of anxiety and just fear around the birth process. Not just going into labor and actually how am I going to get through this, but also adding in the fear and anxiety around COVID. There was just so much unknown, and I was so just nerve-wracked around the whole experience of going into the hospital and having my child. And really was like the first experience of just like total surrender. Just really having to let everything go and trust that it was all going to work out. With that said, I really wanted to focus on my mindset. It was really important to me to focus on my mindset going in, and I was determined. I was determined that I was going to feel strong and I was going to feel confident. Regardless of everything I couldn't control, I wanted to know that I felt good in control of me. And so I was so glad when a friend of mine introduced me to a book called The Calm Birth Method. So around 36 weeks, I started reading this book, which is all about hypnobirthing. It gave so many tips just around your mindset, around the life that you're creating, what your body is doing, breathing exercises, ways that you can calm yourself and really focus on what's happening when you're going into labor. And it really just gave this very holistic approach to the whole experience, I felt. And it really gave me this sense of peace that no matter what happens, as long as I end up with a healthy baby, I have succeeded in my mission, and I am a winner, right? Like there is no failing when it comes to birth. It's just about you and the baby and everyone being happy and healthy in the end. Reading that book towards the end of my pregnancy was just like the mental fuel that I needed, to not only just give me some tools and some strategies of how I can do this as naturally as possible, but also just like taking that pressure off of myself. I think a lot of us don't admit that we have that like self-competition with ourselves. Like, what if I do get an epidural, or what if I can't do it? One of the other things I did was I watched a ton of birth stories. I found it so incredibly helpful to watch videos like this of other women's positive birth stories. The more stories I heard, the more I could just envision myself with this positive outcome, the more I could see myself giving birth. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited to finally be sharing my birth stories, because they were such an inspiration to me, and honestly one of the reasons why I fell in love with YouTube, because I found it to just be so beneficial to me as a new mom. So, like I said, at 36 weeks, I started reading the Calm Birth Method, and when I went into my 38-week appointment, I was really still very in the dark. So when I went into my 38-week appointment, my OB asked me, how I was feeling and if I had any contractions. I really, honestly, had no clue how to answer. I remember her asking if I wanted her to check me. So because I had no clue, if anything had actually been going on, I personally wanted her to check me because I just wanted to know where I was at, what am I starting with? I was like, yeah, I want to know what's going on down there. So when she checked me, I was so shocked that I was 2.5 centimeters dilated and I was 70% effaced. Still wasn't fully sure what all that meant. But to me, what that just kind of told me was okay, so some of these tight feelings that I've had here and there, they must be doing something, right? But one of the big things that happened at that 38-week appointment too is while she was checking me, she was checking my baby's heart rate, and at that appointment, it was lower than it had been at previous appointments. Because she wanted to be cautious and because we wanted to make sure everything was okay, she decided to send me over to the hospital to have a non-stress test. And I remember feeling at the time oh my gosh, as a new mom, it's just your biggest fear, right? You just want everything to be okay. And so I just remember feeling so nervous driving over to the hospital for that stress test and just praying that everything was all right. It was that 38-week appointment was the beginning of it all. Like I said, up until that point, I really didn't know that I was having contractions. And so I get to this non-stress test, and the whole time I realized that I'm having contractions. What was cool is because I was able to actually watch it on the monitor. So it was actually really confirming to me, okay, so this is what a contraction sort of feels like. So the doctor comes in and let me know that everything looks good, the baby's fine, they're not really concerned. He's like, you've been having contractions here all along, the baby's looking good, do you want me to check you? I was also mentally at this point, I was not ready to have this baby. I say, sure, what the hell, I just want to know where I'm at, if anything's changed. So he checks me, and I went from 2.5 centimeters at the doctor's office to a little over 3 centimeters dilated, and I was still around 75% effaced. So I'm whoa, okay, so I made some progress here in about an hour. He continues to tell me okay, do you want to stay? You're having contractions, do you want to stay and possibly be induced? Like I said, I was not mentally in the mindset of I'm ready to have this baby. So I told him, I really just want to go home. If things progress, I'll come back, obviously, but I just really feel I just want to go home. So that 38-week appointment really was the start of what I realize now was prodromal labor. For the next 2 weeks leading up to my due date, I had every symptom of early labor that you could think of. I lost my mucus plug. There were a few times over that next week where I really felt that was it. I felt this is it, I'm going into labor, I'm having this baby. Contractions would get going and they would just taper off. So it was really a mental game those last 2 weeks. So when I went into my 39-week appointment, I was feeling a little discouraged. Obviously this is normal. As a first-time mom, it's normal. Not everyone goes into labor early, and I really think I had it in my mindset. I thought I was gonna go into labor before 40 weeks. So at my 39-week appointment, literally a week before my due date, my OB is pretty much just all right, well, he seems cozy in there, so what I'm gonna do is why don't we plan for an induction on your due date if he doesn't come on his own before then. I think just because I was nervous and first-time mom and really didn't know what to expect at this point, I just kind of went along with it. But my 2 things that I was really adamant about and really felt really strongly about was that I didn't want to be induced, and I wanted to go into labor on my own and feel my water break. We talked about it. I explained that to her. She let me know that if I changed my mind, I could always cancel it. I leave that appointment. Just like the week before, I continued to have like early labor signs, and I started having like this mucusy sort of discharge happen situation. So I'm like, something's happening here. Like, whether or not it's the real thing, something's happening down there. Comes to the night before my due date, Sunday night, and in my heart, I just knew I want him to come on his own. Like, I'm not ready, he's not ready. So I called the OB floor and I canceled the induction. And I really honestly felt such a weight leave my shoulders, because I really, even now looking back, I can't imagine if you have an induction. There's no judgment from me. In my heart, I just knew that that wasn't supposed to be my story. So my due date comes and goes, nothing happens. I go in for another appointment. At this point, my OB is like, all right, if he doesn't come by Friday, I'm gonna book you for a non-stress test and an ultrasound unless he comes before that. If he doesn't come this week, you're scheduled for an induction next Monday. So obviously at this point, I really didn't want to go a whole nother week. And so I just left that appointment, trusting that everything was gonna work out. He's gonna come on his own. I felt really good, over those next couple days, but something really shifted Wednesday. I just remember feeling really off, that I just in general felt more fragile. It was just like an intuitive knowing that like something's not right. And then Thursday happens. My belly was more tender. Like, I didn't want to stir anything up or do too much because I felt like that was going to lead to something. So Thursday night, I go to bed. In the middle of the night, I get up to pee like I do pretty much every night. And when I went to get back into bed, I felt this gush. So I'm like, whoa, what's that? So I get back out of bed, I run to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God, did my water just break? But I was wearing black running shorts, and so I couldn't really tell. I could tell that it was wet, but I couldn't see if there's any color or whatnot. My husband's dead asleep in the bed, and I knew that he would kill me if I didn't call and like at least tell somebody that this was happening. So I get up and I come into the living room and I call the OB floor, telling them what's happened leading up to this. I tell them about the gush, and they're like, well, we can't say amniotic fluid. So how about you put on a pad and wait for an hour and call us back and let us know like what happens. So I do that, and I lay down for like an hour, and I'm so like wired at this point, like worried, like what does this mean? Am I going to the hospital? Am I gonna have to wake up my husband? I get up at the end of the hour and there's literally like nothing on the pad. I call the OB floor back and I tell them like, look, I'm gonna be seen in the morning. If something happens in between now and then, obviously you'll see me, but I'm gonna be checked in like a few hours anyway. So I just go back to bed and I'll be seen in the morning. So they're like, yeah, that's fine. So I go back to bed and nothing happens. But when I wake up in the morning, I just knew. I just knew something was off. Something was not right. And I just remember feeling like uncomfortable. Thankfully, my husband like convinced me to pack our bags up in the car, and we go to this appointment. And I go up to the non-stress test, and this is really where everything took a turn, because I get up on the table and I just remember feeling like so uncomfortable. I couldn't sit still, and I immediately am like, oh my God, I can't do this. So I went to sit up, and as soon as I do that, the alarm goes off on the stress test, and I'm like, oh shit, what did I do? The tech comes rushing back in, and next thing I know, a midwife is in my face, and she's like, hi, you don't know me, but you are gonna have your baby today. And I'm just like, what? So she tells me that when I moved, baby's heart rate dropped significantly low, and it didn't just drop, it stayed dropped for like, for the better part of a minute. Like, we just need to get this baby out. So she sends me on my way, and I go downstairs to my husband, and I'm just like, I screwed up. I did something wrong. Which obviously I didn't do anything wrong, but it's just that we both, I think still at this point, I wasn't mentally prepared to have the baby. I think at this point I was just afraid. I was afraid of the experience. I was afraid of the what if, I can't do it. So when we get over to the hospital, I was just like a ball of nerves, and they are so full. So mind you, it's COVID. Hospital is just like so packed to the max. So at this point, I get to the hospital around 11 a.m. We didn't see anyone till 1. Just waiting there, we're hungry, and finally the doctor comes in at 1 o'clock, and she tells me, listen, like, you're gonna have this baby today. We can't send you home, and God forbid this happens again and we don't catch it. So at that point, that's all I really needed to hear. Someone to tell me, like, this is happening, you're in labor, and you're gonna have a baby today. And she told me that. That was like the shift that I needed. At that moment, I just mentally and emotionally and spiritually resigned that this is the day. I put my game face on. It's like this surrendering moment. And I swear to you, as soon as I did that, my body kicked into gear. No more was it just like this prodromal labor. It was like my body got the okay that, yep, this is happening, let's go. So they start the admitting process. I get a gown and I'm like, okay, so if I'm gonna have it, like, we're gonna do this, can I get like a ball? Can I get one of those bouncy balls? And so I get my gown on, I get on this ball, and I remember sending a picture to my girlfriend and being like, we're getting admitted, like, it's happening. Right after I sent her that picture, my water breaks. I remember feeling like a pop. I'm like, did you just hear that? And the nurse was right there, and she's like, oh my God. And she saw it on the monitor, and I'm like, what was that? She's like, maybe it was your water breaking. So she leaves the room, and next thing you know, I hear another huge pop, and it's just like huge gush of warm water all over this ball. I remember just waddling into the bathroom, like, oh shit, my water just broke. I think at this point, it's somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So my water breaks, and as soon as my water breaks, my contractions really kicked it into high gear. Up until this point, I was able to talk. I, really didn't have to focus during my contractions, but after my water broke, my contractions really became something that I had to like breathe through. Everything that I learned from the calm birth method really started to kick in at this moment. So I think at this point, the contractions were about 3 to 4 minutes apart. At 4 o'clock, they finally get me into a room. So I waddle like down the hall really quickly, and I just remember immediately wanting to get back on the ball. I felt there was no position that I was comfortable in other than being on the ball. Like, I didn't want to be anywhere but on the ball. I'm starting to really like feel it at this point, but I'm still doing okay with, my breathing exercises. My nurse suggested that I get into the shower. As soon as she says that, I'm like, oh yes. At this point, I was having a lot of back pressure. The thought of having hot water like running on my back sounded so wonderful. So they get me in the shower, and I'm just butt naked on a ball with the water running on my back, and Nate's in there with me, my husband, doing like counter pressure every contraction. This is really where I did the most of my laboring, was in the shower. But at change of shift, so around 7:30, like, I really felt a change. Just started to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I was starting to feel a lot of pressure, and I started to feel like I needed to push. So I sent my husband out to hunt down a nurse, which is not easy at change of shift, to bring someone in because I felt like I needed to push. Nurse comes in and she checks me, and I was 7 centimeters. I'm like, 7 centimeters? Like, I thought I was like there. She's like, well, you're 7 centimeters, but you're 100% effaced. When I look back now, like, oh my God, I was so close. Like, at that moment, I wish someone would have just told me how close I was to like being done. This is really where I started to like lose it, because for me, I started to feel like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like, I'm doing it, I've done it, but this isn't something I feel like I can sustain. I felt like I either needed to push or my insides were gonna fall out. I remember looking at Nate and being like, Nate, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I feel like I'm gonna die. Like, I either need to push this baby out or I'm gonna die. I'm like, you need to go back and get the nurse again, because I don't think I can do this. So she comes in and she starts talking to me about an epidural. Like, do I want an epidural? Like, there's still time. And I'm like, I don't know, like, I guess, like, because I don't think, like, I feel like I just need to push, and if I can't push, then I need help. So they start to hook me up to a bolus and page the anesthesiologist to proceed with an epidural, but like, this was like minutes. Like, it was not very long. This whole process felt like such a whirlwind because it wasn't very long. that I realized, no, I gotta push. So she lets me get back up on the bed, and she says, okay, with your next contraction, you can push. And so next contraction comes, and she checks me, and she's like, oh, okay. I see the head. Let's go. So she calls the doctor, and she's like, okay, don't push. Like, I need to go get your doctor. So I'm like, no, I'm not stopping. So I continue to push. And at this point, everyone comes in, almost 8 o'clock, I think, at this point. And I'm so grateful for my OB, because if not for her, I think I would have been pushing for such a long time. I had no idea how to push. I mean, how do you learn how to push, before you're in it, before you go into labor? Without her guiding me with how to push, I think I would have been pushed so much longer than I needed to. We're getting towards the end, and I can feel him coming down, and every time I would stop pushing, he would slide right back up. So it's around 9 o'clock, and she's like, he's right there. Like, he's right there, Amy. At this point, they realized that his shoulders were getting stuck. All of a sudden, tons of nurses come running in, and they flip me on my side. My OB tells me that at the next contraction, everyone pushes on my abdomen. And she was able to hook her fingers around his shoulders, and he was born. And I'm just so grateful for my husband and for the nurses who were with me, and for my OB, because they really made the whole experience such a positive experience in the end. So at 9:10, he was born, and I just remember feeling so stunned and just in shock and almost disbelief that I did it, that he was here and I was a mom, and that I did it on my own. I don't think there's any better feeling that I've ever had than that moment. He weighed 7 pounds, 14 ounces, 20 inches long, and he was just a perfect little baby boy. And I'm just so thankful that we just had a healthy baby boy. And because I didn't end up getting the epidural, we were able to leave on day 2, and I'm just so thankful for that. As far as tearing goes, I didn't really tear. She said I had like a minor abrasion, and I just felt really good. It felt as good as you can feel, right? That experience really showed me that I can do this. Getting to that 7-centimeter point, getting to transition, I can get there, I can do it. And he is now an almost 4-year-old, so I'm a little late in getting this story out there, but I am so glad to have this here for myself and for you, be able to inspire you that if you are a new mom or an expecting mom, that you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. So I hope that you enjoy this, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, loves.